Okay, what page am I on anyway? Oh, wait. Here we go. All right, let's try this again.
There lies at the edge of time the tale of the dawn of mankind. Beyond forever. Just a passing moment in time.
It was unbearably humid in Chattanooga that day. Mid-morning rains washed the dust and pollen from the houses and trees, caressing the landscape in a cooling breeze. But now, the clouds had parted to a clean blue sky, and the sun beat down to heat the moisture to an unbearable humidity. Simon Handler drove his compact silver sedan through the city on the way to a destination far away. The hot air blasted through the driver's side window as he cursed and swore at the air conditioner that chose today to break down. The sounds of locusts and cicadas filled the air, the only living things that seemed to thrive in that weather. 36-year-old Simon was a determined man who tried desperately to ignore his discomfort. His short brown hair was slowly moistening with sweat, and his blue-gray eyes ceased their obsession with the dashboard. Once again, he found himself deep in concentration, filled with fear and disappointment that the time for his return had finally come. Damn the fates for doing this to him. He had experienced true peace, happiness, and contentment for the first time in his peculiar life, only to have it wrested from him in this way. It wasn't fair to him or to his family. His dear, sweet wife, Natasha. What must she be going through right now? He would never forget the hurt look she gave him when he told her that he had to go away for a while, or there was a possibility that he might not survive the upcoming ordeal at all. He warned her years earlier when they were first engaged that one day he would have to leave to take care of some unfinished family business. Her curiosity was naturally piqued when he couldn't tell her more than that, and it raised more than a few questions he simply could not answer. She just wouldn't understand the truth. But now the time had come, and that family business was waiting for him. He knew that Tosh loved him and trusted him, but that didn't ease the pain or the look of betrayal she gave him when he told her that the time for his departure had arrived. She was understandably enraged when he couldn't answer any of her questions, and the expression on her face hurt him deeply. But there was nothing he could do about it. That business was not going to go away, and if he failed to put an end to it once and for all, the responsibility would fall upon his children, and that was something he would never allow. Leaving the city, he took a route along the Tennessee River, passing shrubs, wildflowers and river birch, a sight he adored and feared that he would never see again. So with a growing sense of dread, he silently said goodbye to the sights and places that he had come to know so well. Arizona was so far away. His family lived in Tempe for a short while before he even arrived in this world, and they made a couple of nostalgic trips back there when he was just a kid. Those were fond memories for him, but now it was a destination outside of Phoenix that drew him. He hoped his grandfather was correct about what he would find when he got there. Grandfather warned him to never venture to the place unless Simon planned to use it, or it could potentially compromise the security of the site. So Simon had to wait for certain signs that indicated that the time for action had come. The unmistakable signs had indeed appeared. The time was obviously now, and Simon feared what his family's legacy had in store for him when all was said and done. Taking scenic back roads instead of the interstate, Simon enjoyed Tennessee's natural beauty, but his eyes kept wandering to the rearview mirror. He could not be certain, but a black sport utility vehicle seemed to be following him. To be certain, Simon made some odd course changes with his car, and the SUV stayed behind him every step of the way. No doubt, he was being followed. He didn't think they were the police they were following from too far away. The SUV windows were tinted, preventing him from seeing who was inside, so Simon studied the vehicle for a while and tried to analyze the driving patterns. The SUV seemed quite content to follow from a safe distance and appeared to be of no immediate threat. So who were they? Whoever they were, Simon had a feeling in his gut that they were up to no good. With a growing sense of unease, Simon decided it was time for him to gain the upper hand. If something bad was about to go down, it would be far better if it happened on his terms and not theirs. With that in mind, he kept an eye out for a suitably public location. Before long, he spotted a shopping center that had a fairly large parking lot. There was even a submarine sandwich shop where he could grab a bite to eat. It would have to do. So Simon drove his car into the shopping center and parked in a space. The SUV pulled into the lot some distance away. Simon pretended he didn't notice the black vehicle as he got out of his car and casually walked to the sandwich shop, all the while watching the SUV reflected in the building's glass. Once inside the refreshingly cool shop, Simon ordered himself a 6-inch ham, turkey, and Swiss on a wheat roll and poured himself a large orange soda. He couldn't see the SUV, but he knew it was out there somewhere. When his order was ready, he took his sandwich and a bag of chips to a table near the window and saw that the SUV was facing the building, now parked only a few spaces away from his car. Simon absent-mindedly chewed his food as he intently studied the mysterious black car. He searched for clues, anything that might help him make some sense of this bizarre situation. The strange car had obviously been customized to a certain extent and appeared quite sleek and stylish, but the window tinting was so dark that he could not even see movement inside. Deep down, he knew that this had something to do with his trip to Arizona, which meant that he had to devise a plan of action. The shopping center didn't look too busy at that time of day, and there were only 3 other customers in the restaurant with him. The spacious parking lot offered plenty of maneuvering room, but little else. May as well get it over with. Simon steeled himself, disposed of his trash, and refilled his drink. Improvisation would just have to make up for the lack of vital information. So he paused, took a deep breath, and stepped back outside. As he walked back to his car, he could hear the sound of the SUV's still running engine, and Simon looked around the area for anything that might be useful. He spotted a bent metal rod partially buried in the dirt of a planter, and that was all. Not much to work with. He intentionally did not look at the SUV, hoping that whoever was inside would think that he had not noticed them. As he got closer to his car, he could hear the crunching of slow-moving tires upon the asphalt. One look at the reflection on his car window confirmed it. The SUV was creeping up on him. Simon remained calm, but his mind was racing. It was difficult to devise a strategy when the opponent was unknown. He knew it would be too dangerous to get back onto the road, so he decided to make a stand right there in the open. The SUV was now uncomfortably close, so Simon placed his soda on the roof of his car, unlocked and opened the driver's side door, and pretended to drop his keys. As he bent down to pick up the keys, he casually reached under the seat of the car and grabbed a screwdriver, then deftly slipped the tool into his pocket unseen. The SUV stopped, and the vehicle's scissor doors both swung upward as Simon stood up, took his soda from the roof of his car, and sipped at it. Facing the SUV, Simon watched as black boots stepped out, and two very large black and gray-clad figures emerged from the dark interior. Simon couldn't identify the two men, whose faces were covered by semi-mechanical, creepy-looking masks. Their short, stiff black hair stood straight up on top and out along the sides. The left lenses of their masks glowed with an eerie, pulsating light. The thuggish-looking pair appeared strong and powerful, and every inch of their bodies was covered, leaving Simon to wonder if they were alive or machine. Their movements were slow and deliberate, almost zombie-like, possibly machine. The two figures walked up to Simon and stopped. Simon was 6'2", and these guys looked down at him. One of them had a red streak going through his hair, and Simon assumed he must be the leader. He decided to call him Red. Red and his henchmen. Then Simon did something he was sure they did not expect. "Hey guys!" Acting as if you see people like that every day. "How you doing? You boys don't look like you're from around here. Tourists, huh?" Red tilted his head slightly as if confused. Simon quickly looked around as if trying to find something. "I am so lost," pointing to the main road. "Do you know if that's the quickest way to get downtown?" Both figures seemed to study Simon very carefully before looking at each other in silent communication. Simon rambled on. "I hope my wife never finds out about this. You know how women are. I'll never hear the end of it. You're always getting lost, she says, and she's always saying that my sense of direction is so bad I don't even know which way is up." The two figures silently stared at him. "So what do you boys think about that, huh?" Simon asked them, knowing he wouldn't get a response. For a while, it seemed as though they were all just going to stand and look at each other. But then, Red, in one quick motion, reached out to grab Simon. But Simon leaned away from the attack and threw his soda into Red's face. Red was momentarily stunned, but recovered quickly. His mask dripped droplets of orange as he returned his attention to Simon. Red's henchman also moved rather quickly, as he too tried to capture Simon. But Simon lithely swung around, took the screwdriver from his pocket, and drove it solidly into Henchman's shoulder. The henchman didn't yell, scream, or make any sound whatsoever. In fact, he did not appear to react to the injury at all, except to reach up with a gloved hand and pull the screwdriver from his body. The henchman threw the screwdriver to the ground, and Simon could not tell if the yellowish liquid covering the tool was some sort of blood or machine fluid. Either way, he now knew that these two were not human. The problem was, he still had no idea who these two were or what they were capable of. Judging by the henchman's reaction to being stabbed by the screwdriver, they didn't hurt easily. Henchmen circled around as Red approached Simon head-on, forcing Simon to back away from them, making sure to keep the buildings behind him. Spectators began to gather outside the shops, which complicated matters greatly. Not only did Simon have to worry about his own well-being, now he had to focus on their safety as well. Red raised his arm, and a large tube extended from the sleeve of his jacket. A tube that fired two projectiles that narrowly missed Simon and struck a wall dangerously close to an elderly couple. The old woman screamed when she realized that they were almost shot. Once he knew the couple was unharmed, Simon returned his attention to the two thugs, but he saw movement through the corner of his eye. The old couple was hobbling to safety as small, dark shapes came out of the two holes in the wall caused by the alien projectiles. Some sort of nasty-looking alien insects were crawling about, getting a sense of their surroundings. There were 6 in all, and the vicious-looking creatures spotted the old couple and decided that the man and woman would make a tasty meal. Simon had no choice. He sidestepped around Red and his henchman, ran to the planter he saw earlier, and yanked the bent metal rod out of the dirt. Henchman produced some sort of weapon from his pocket and fired a beam of blue energy at Simon, who ducked and rolled out of the way. His car, however, was not as fortunate. In a sudden eruption of fire, glass, and metal debris, Simon's poor silver sedan was obliterated. With no time to waste, Simon dashed back to the old couple, where the old man was uselessly beating at the bugs with his cane. Momentarily ignoring Red and his henchman, Simon swung that rod down hard onto the tough little critters that were actually quite difficult to smash and kill. When the last insect was dead, Simon found himself falling forward as if shoved. The wind was briefly knocked out of him, and a sharp pain radiated up and down his spine. Falling against the wall for support, he looked behind him. Red had punched him in the back. Now Red charged him, grabbed him with both hands, lifted him off of the ground, turned toward the parking lot, and threw him a considerable distance. Simon slid across the pavement and rolled to a stop near the henchman, who reached down and punched him across the face, busting his lip. Henchman grabbed Simon by the front of the shirt, lifted him up, and punched him again. Simon fell face first against the hot asphalt as Henchman proceeded to kick him in the side. Fighting excruciating pain and gasping to catch his breath, Simon berated himself for getting caught off guard like that. He was smarter than this. There was a time he would have easily mopped the floor with these guys. Either he's getting old or just out of practice, but he had better figure out a plan before he wound up dead. Through searing pain, Simon lifted his head and looked around. All of the spectators had gone indoors and peered out of store windows. Some were on their phones, undoubtedly speaking with 911. He had to act fast. Henchman reached down to punch him again, but Simon kicked him hard in the knee, momentarily destabilizing the thug. Only for a moment, but that was all the time he needed. Red approached as Simon picked himself off of the ground and wiped the blood and saliva from his lip and chin with the back of his hand. The combat training he received from his grandfather and his grandfather's men was finally kicking in. So he looked at his attackers and wiped the blood from his mouth once more. "Okay, you gruesome bastards," he said to the two dark figures. "It's my turn." The two figures stood nearby as if confused, as if they were analyzing the situation to determine a course of action. Simon didn't give them that chance. Simon slowly moved around until Red was in front of him and the henchman was behind Red. With a quick thrust, Simon punched Red in the solar plexus and then gave a well-placed kick to the face mask, which produced the desired result. Red staggered backward into Henchman, which opened them both up for his assault. Simon circled his opponents and beat on them mercilessly. The thugs did their best to handle the situation and fend him off, but Simon's true fighting skills were far superior to their own. Red and the henchman tried using various weapons and tools, but Simon retrieved the bent metal rod and beat them both into unconsciousness. With muscles tensed, Simon stood over the two motionless figures. Sweat poured from him and his heart pounded in his chest. It was over. He reached down to unmask one of them, hoping to get a better understanding of who they were and why they were after him. But he heard the sound of approaching sirens and knew that he was out of time. The last thing he needed was to be detained by the authorities, who would have lots of questions he could not answer. In an effort to conceal the aliens' presence on Earth, Simon attempted to drag the two attackers to their SUV, but each of them weighed a ton and would not budge. Exhausted, he looked at the semi-devastated parking lot, complete with the burning wreck that used to be his car. Spectators used their phones to take photos and video behind the safety of window glass. The sirens were awfully close, and he had a decision to make. He hated to leave evidence for law enforcement to find, but it couldn't be helped. There was far too much of it to clean up, and no time left in which to do it. He abandoned his two attackers and dashed to their SUV. He was glad to discover that the engine was still running. A twinge of sadness crept in as he saw what was left of his car. The explosion burnt part of the SUV, but not enough to make it inoperable. He spotted the satchel that contained his things laying in the parking lot a few yards away, thrown clear by the explosion. So he grabbed the singed bag and jumped into the SUV. The scissor doors closed as he put the car in gear and tore out of that parking lot in a squeal of rubber. Almost immediately after, a group of police cars entered the parking lot. Various spectators and shoppers in the center cautiously began to vacate the buildings. Simon furiously drove his stolen SUV as he endeavored to put as much distance between himself and that debacle back there. Keeping a sharp eye on the rear-view mirrors, he felt certain no one was following him, so he slowed the vehicle to a normal speed. Quickly looking around the car's interior, he became confident that nothing was going to jump out and harm him. In fact, there was nothing otherworldly about this vehicle at all as far as he could see, although there was a nasty lingering smell he could not identify. Glancing at the fuel gauge, he saw that he had just under 3/4 of a tank of gas, so he didn't have to worry about filling up anytime soon. Therefore, He resumed his journey to Arizona. The sooner he got there, the better. Simon traveled along the I-10 westward, sleeping at truck stops and rest areas as he neared Arizona. He drove through Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, and 3 days after he started, he entered the Grand Canyon State. The sun had yet to rise when he stopped at a corner gas station and purchased a map. He used cash everywhere he went to avoid leaving a paper trail. Studying the map, he located the site in an area outside of Phoenix, so he put gas in the tank and headed off in that direction. It was about 3 in the afternoon, and Simon had taken the SUV off-road. The sun was shining and it was hot, but at least the air conditioner worked in this car. He was on the lookout for certain geological features that he was told would point the way, but so far he had limited success. Obviously, many topographical formations had changed over the decades, which made the process of pinpointing his exact location extremely difficult. After about another 20 minutes of what he thought was aimless driving, he began to see distinct formations and realized that he was on the right track. He now knew exactly where to go. He steered his vehicle towards some mountains and eventually arrived at the rocky base. He drove the SUV around some large stone clusters and came across the entrance to a large cave. Turning on his headlights, Simon slowly drove the SUV into the mouth of the mysterious cavern and maneuvered around rocks and formations. The interior of the cave was spacious but unremarkable. Simon pulled the SUV off to one side, using the headlights to illuminate the interior more than the sunlight could. The scissor doors swung open, and Simon stepped outside. He took a flashlight from his scorched satchel, gathered his belongings, and slung the bag across his shoulders. Leaving the SUV behind, he ventured deeper into the cavern. The beam of his flashlight swept around the rocky surfaces until he came across a rather large outcropping of stone. Pausing to take a deep breath, Simon placed his hand against the cold rock and kept it there. The soft whine of unseen machinery could be heard coming to life. Taking his hand away, Simon saw a glowing handprint radiating from the surface of the stone as he stepped back in anticipation. With a rumble, 3 rock formations rose up out of the stone floor, each with a recessed area containing a layer of multicolored glowing crystals. The crystals illuminated the cave's dark interior, negating Simon's need for the flashlight, which he put back into his bag. Simon studied the crystals carefully. He picked one up and looked it over. He then replaced the crystal, but in a different position. Then he rearranged the crystals within each of the 3 columns. Several feet away, a single point of very bright light appeared in midair, and the rock walls on both sides of Simon began to shift and unfold, revealing 2 towering crystal robots that up until now had been dormant within the cold stone. But now the robots were activated, and they stepped out to join him. The robots were 7 feet tall, semi-transparent, and appeared to be made entirely of crystal. Their heads looked like solid glass globes without inner workings, and a long, slender, jagged crystal spike rose upward upon each shoulder. Simon was not surprised to see them. The point of light expanded into an enormous glowing ring, a gateway of sorts. Simon looked to the robot on his left and the other to his right, and sighed. "All right," he said. "Let's get this thing started." Simon stepped into the ring of light and vanished. His 2 crystal warrior companions followed. and disappeared as well. The ring of light closed, and the 3 stone control pedestals withdrew back into the floor, and the sound of unseen machinery wound down into silence. The cave was dark once again, without indication that anything occurred there at all. The only light came from the sunshine at the mouth of the cave, and the now vacant SUV that sat quietly with its headlamps that continued to stab at the darkness. What Simon never noticed was the transmitter built into the auto body of the SUV, a transmitter that sent out a signal over and over again. Someone, somewhere, knew that he was coming, and that someone would be waiting.
To be continued.